I'm standing here where the River of Grass used to be. That's the area just south of Lake Okeechobee where the water from the lake spilled over into the Everglades and made a pristine shallow water marshland that millions of birds and wildlife called home. But today, there's a giant dike behind me and miles of sugarcane fields have replaced the beautiful marshlands. Most of the birds here are cattle egrets and they survive on pieces of bugs, snakes, and rodents that get chopped up at harvest time. For years, environmentalists have been fighting to get this land turned back into the River of Grass, but it's been an uphill battle. I'm about to share with you all the crazy laws that's been passed the past 30 years. Sadly, most have been broken, changed, or just plain ignored. In 1988, the federal government sued the state of Florida and South Florida Water Management District. The suit claimed that the state was allowing polluted water to enter the pristine Everglades. This infuriated Big Sugar and the state of Florida. Lawyers for both teamed up and fought the suit for 3 years. In 1991, newly elected Governor Lawton Childs marched right into court and agreed with the claim and entered a plea of surrender. This stopped the suit in its tracks and started the wheels turning on the next step for the Everglades. In 1994, the Everglades Forever Act was signed into law. Its main objective was to stop the pollution from farmers, more specifically phosphorus. There was a threshold established at 10 parts per billion and a timetable put into place for this threshold to be met. The farmers were also mandated to use, and I quote, best management practices to reduce pollution on their own. Regulators were also hired to monitor the levels in the EAA, but by 2001, it was clear to them that the threshold could not be reached. So in 2003, our lawmakers drafted another bill to extend the deadline until 2026. That's a 23-year extension. Environmentalists devised a nickname for this bill. They called it the Everglades Whenever Act. In 1997, the Everglades construction project was implemented. It was funded by the Forever Act and cost a whopping $825 million. The project consisted of 6 stormwater treatment areas totaling 40,000 acres. These shallow water man-made marshes were strategically positioned downstream of agricultural land and major canals. The goal was to get the phosphorus levels below the 10 parts per billion threshold. The STAs were a huge success. Not only did the phosphorus levels go down, the areas were a magnet for birds and wildlife. Today, they are Florida's premier places for birdwatchers to get a glimpse on how the Everglades once was. In 1999, the Army Corps of Engineers submitted a plan to Congress to restore the Everglades. The plan was the largest environmental restoration project ever proposed in the United States, and at a cost of $10.5 billion, it was projected to take over 30 years to complete. Congress passed this plan in 2000, and it was called CERP, which stands for the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. CERP has 68 different projects. All are designed to increase the flow of water back into the Everglades National Park. Some canals will be filled in, while other spreader canals will be installed to divert the water into a sheet flow, and part of the Tamiami Trail would be raised to allow the water to flow into the park. If successful, CERP will increase the amount of water going into the park by 100 billion gallons, bringing the total to 325 billion gallons per year. Even if they hit their target, that's still 125 billion gallons short of the historic levels. In 2004, the MICCOSUKEE and Seminole Indian tribes sued the state for allowing polluted water to enter their reservations. 4 years of legal battles erupted, and in 2008, a federal judge ruled that the state had violated its fundamental commitment and promise to protect the Everglades. As a result, the state got the option to buy 187,000 acres of land that U.S. Sugar owned, but the state failed to come up with the money and was only able to buy 26,000 acres, with an option to buy more later. Furthermore, when the cultural research surveys were done, they found Indian burial grounds on some of this land. We're not even sure how much of it we can use. You would have thought that they would have checked that before they bought it. The option to buy the rest of the land came with many strings attached. A value was not placed on the land at the time of the option. Instead, it would be sold at fair market value at the time any deal was struck. That left the door wide open for what U.S. Sugar did next. They immediately started to get the land rezoned to make it more valuable. They slapped a plan together that included plans to build 18,000 homes and 25 million square feet of commercial, stores, offices, and warehouses. Take a drive through the Glades and you will see vacant properties on every corner. This was just a clear attempt to make the land more valuable so the state would have to pay more. In August of 2014, U.S. Sugar fast-tracked their plan right through to the Henry County Commissioners. At the public meeting, several environmental groups were there vigorously protesting the move, but when they finished their presentations, without any discussions, the commissioners unanimously passed this rezoning. Can you believe that? In 2013, Governor Rick Scott signed a bill called Restoration Strategies. It set aside $80 million per year for the next 10 years. The tax on sugar farmers remained, but he refused to strengthen the already weakened standards for phosphorus that was put into place in the 2003 revision. For instance, a farmer who produced phosphorus levels higher than the allowable level couldn't be singled out, as long as all the other farms around him collectively had lower levels, so the polluters were not being held accountable. The reason for this move was clear when the public learned that the South Florida Water Management District owns 2 sugar farms in Palm Beach County, totaling 1,200 acres. These 2 farms produce levels of phosphorus that is 3 times the already low standards, and tests over a 4-year period showed that they were getting worse and not better. So let's get this straight. The district, who is in charge of enforcing the law, is one of the biggest polluters. How is this possible? In November of 2014, 75% of the Florida voters were fed up with all these shenanigans and passed Amendment 1, which allocated $700 million to specifically buy land for conservation. The money was put into a trust fund called the Land Acquisition Trust Fund. Furthermore, it prohibited the legislature from using the money to pay general expenses. That couldn't be any clearer. We finally had the money we needed, and the first chance to buy land came in 2015 when the state had an option to buy 46,800 acres of land. The option was the result of the court ruling back in 2008 when the economy was in recession and the sugar business was in decline. But in 2015, with the economy back up and running, the sugar farmers were making record profits, and they were clearly putting pressure on our legislature. As a result, the option to buy the land expired with no deal. What a slap in the face. Later that year, lawmakers were caught diverting money from the Land Acquisition Trust Fund to pay salaries and expenses that were clearly not land purchases. 2 lawsuits were brought by environmentalists, and you won't believe what happened next. In 2016, the legislature passed the Legacy Florida Act. On the surface, they made it look like a good bill for the Everglades, but in reality, it made it legal to use Amendment 1 money to fund other projects all over the state instead of buying land, which is what Amendment 1 was designed to do. It was like putting lipstick on a pig. We voted on that amendment, and then they changed it. 75% of the voters in Florida ought to be appalled by this action. The state still holds an option to buy 153,000 acres until October 11th, 2020. But here's the catch. The land is subject to a leaseback, which means the state will have to lease the land back to U.S. Sugar for 20 more years. Bottom line is, we would have to shell out $1 billion or more and wait for 20 plus years before we would be able to dig the first shovel of dirt on any project. I would like to meet the person that negotiated that deal. It's embarrassing how our politicians have been outsmarted time and time again. Here's an idea, lawmakers. How about you pass a law allowing the government to take the land under eminent domain? After all, that's what you guys do the best, change the law. There's already laws on the books for roads, bridges, and pipelines. There's no reason why you can't pass one for clean water. Since you guys can't negotiate, you won't have to anymore. You can just take the land and let a judge determine fair market value, just like they do when they build a road. We not only have to fight Big Sugar, but we have to fight our own government too. It's time we stop taking all this crap. We got to get more people involved so that we can teach our politicians when we say buy the land, they need to write the check. After all, they work for us, and it's our money that they're spending.